Hi guys, it's Kirsty. I hope you had a lovely Christmas, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you had lovely holidays, whether it's Hanukkah or anything else that takes place around this time of year. Or if not celebrating any of those holidays, I hope you've had a good week. So today's video is about one of the books on the reading list, a fantastic book by Viktor Frankl named Man's Search for Meaning. So apologies, I read this book on my Kindle, so I don't actually have a copy of it in person to show you, but this is the cover of it. But before I go into that, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. Okay, so this is so I've previously done videos about 4 of the other books on the reading list, and those 4 other books have been specifically mental health books. So the 2 Albert Ellis books, Stubbornly Refuse and The Myth of Self-Esteem, about challenging irrational beliefs, which is an important part of OCD recovery, to remove the kind of exaggerated feelings that come with the themes and thoughts, so like to help to bring down the anxiety. The other 2 books are At Last Alive and Self-Help for Your Nerves, both specifically about recovery from anxiety, so whether that's OCD, generalized anxiety or panic disorders. So that's what those books are about. So this book is a bit different in that it's written by Viktor Frankl about his experiences in German concentration camps during the Second World War. So he was Jewish Austrian who was captured during the Second World War. His family were also captured, wife and children, and put in separate concentration camps. He was also a psychologist who invented the type of therapy called logotherapy, which is about kind of looking for meaning, which I will talk about in a bit. So the book focuses on his experience while he was in the concentration camps, and some of his kind of self-discoveries during that time. And the reason this book is on the reading list is because it's more of a opportunity for us to flip our perspectives on our OCD suffering. I know that Rob, who founded OCD Recovery, found some anger when he started to recover, when he looked back on his time, the years that he'd lost suffering from OCD. And I think that that's probably relevant for a lot of us, whether that's sort of thinking about the time that we may have lost from suffering from OCD or various other mental health difficulties, or anything in fact, but also just the anger that we feel that, you know, that we have this kind of chronic condition, I suppose. So to help us to come to reach a point of acceptance of having OCD itself. So this book can really help with that perspective, and that's what I would like to discuss. OCD suffering can be, it strips us a lot of joy, and it can be very debilitating, and it can take away a lot of the good stuff out of our day-to-day lives when we're at the worst of it. But what we want to do is to get ourselves to the point where we believe it's definitely something that we can stand, and we can still have small pleasures while we are in the midst of still struggling with OCD, or, you know, at the very early points of our OCD recovery, and then later on as we push through further in our OCD recovery journeys. So Viktor Frankl talks about his day-to-day experiences of being in the concentration camps. So Viktor Frankl has been, you know, in this experience, been exposed to, you know, torture, some starvation, watching his fellow prisoners die of starvation, or die of kind of not receiving medical help because of the dire conditions that they're forced to live in, you know, living within their own, you know, feces, having to do manual hard labour day after day, regardless of injuries or any kind of ailments that they may have. And of course, we later now know about some testing that was going on with certain prisoners as well, kind of clinical testing and things, which essentially is kind of torturous behaviour as well. So these things that Viktor Frankl was exposed to day after day. But he talked about how through this experience he would find comfort in small things. So, for example, certain routines of the day, or it might be brief conversations with certain other prisoners, or it might be sitting back and observing things. And one of the main things that helped him to get through day by day, the kind of mental torment side of all of it, of course, there'd have been, depression, fear, what anger must have been going on for these people when they were having these experiences. Obviously the injustice of it. But one of the things that helped him get through the whole experience was to find meaning in it, and his meaning that he held to was his love of his family, particularly his wife. So kind of holding on to memories of her, and sadly his family were killed while they were in the concentration camps, whilst on the other hand he had been released, but he wouldn't have known what their fate was at the time, but he held on to kind of the memories. And so this is kind of not to make us feel bad about feeling bad about having OCD, but it's to consider the good things that we can find each day whilst we're suffering with OCD. If somebody who was in a prisoner of war camp, simply just because of their heritage, their birth heritage and their religion, they can sort of find any pleasure or meaning in their day-to-day life, then surely we can find, small things to get us through the very darkest times, and to find some meaning in our suffering. For example, so at the end of Rob's suffering with OCD, the biggest meaning that perhaps he's taken from it is that he's set up OCD recovery, which enables lots of us who have been suffering to access the correct kind of help and access resources that weren't previously available to us. So whatever kind of meaning that we can find from the time that we may have lost suffering, or any new things that we've learned, can really, really help us with our perspective about OCD. And it can help us in that respect to unlock a little bit as well, if you kind of open your mind to changing your perspective about it. One of Viktor Frankl's observations during his time in the concentration camp was that he would observe his own thoughts and feelings day to day, as well as watching the behaviours of his fellow prisoners. And one of his observations was that some of the prisoners who were kind of helping others, to offer the last slice, their last piece of bread or something to somebody else who may have been in greater need, some of those ones were alongside him when they were finally released. And his kind of his major theory that he derived from watching these kind of behaviours was that you can take away everything from a man, woman, a person. You can take away their, all their comforts and everything. But the one thing that you can't take away is their choice to take on a certain type of attitude. So their choice to survive, their choice to try to survive, and how they choose to behave towards others. To explain this better, I am going to read a synopsis to you, because I can't actually word it more articulately than this. A prominent Viennese psychiatrist before the war, Viktor Frankl was uniquely able to observe the way that both he and others in the concentration camps coped, or didn't, with the experience. He noticed that it was the men who comforted others and who gave away their last piece of bread who survived the longest, and who offered proof that everything can be taken away from us except the ability to choose our attitude in any given set of circumstances. The sort of person the prisoner became was the result of an inner decision and not the camp influences alone. Only those who allowed their inner hold on their moral and spiritual selves to subside eventually fell victim to the camp's degenerating influence, while those who made a victory of those experiences turned them into an inner triumph. Frankl came to believe man's deepest desire is to search for meaning and purpose. This outstanding work offers us all a way to transcend suffering and find significance in the art of living. And I completely agree. It is an outstanding book, and I think that anybody who is a fan of non-fiction, or even who prefers reading fiction, as I have done previously, I think this should definitely be on anyone's reading list. It's a brilliant book, and it is an excellent supplement to read alongside the books that are kind of the other books on the reading list that focus more on anxiety and mental health difficulties, because this is still about changing our perspectives, and finding purpose and meaning from some of the suffering that we've experienced, thinking that at some point perhaps we might use it to help others, or to help ourselves at some point. So, and even if it's like from me, I know that I've used the tools that I've learned in my OCD recovery in other parts of my life. And I'm also able to kind of give decent advice to sort of friends and family when they're having difficult times, and be somebody who can listen to them in a kind of slightly less judgmental way, which I'm grateful for. Books like this can be very, very helpful for us to read when we're having a difficult time, because in some ways you can derive some of the extra strength that you need to push through from kind of the inspiration provided by others. So in this case, Viktor Frankl's absolute will to survive and find meaning in his experiences in the absolute most dire circumstances is really, really inspirational for us to kind of use his strength to inspire our own strength to push through and do what's needed for our recovery, whether that's to stop certain avoidance behaviours, or to, push through exposures, or start to dispute irrational beliefs that we're frightened to dispute. Other books, personally for me, I found these kind of this kind of literature also very useful in my OCD recovery journey, alongside the self-help books that were recommended. Not so alongside this book, I've actually read quite a few other books about people who have overcome difficult circumstances, some of them mental health, whether that's addiction or mental health difficulties, or whether that's so things that have happened to them in life and how they've overcome it. I find that inspiring, and I also find it really hopeful. Makes me feel very hopeful as well. And when we are in the most difficult times in our OCD suffering, it's that hope of something different at some point that kind of keeps us striving towards, and that's what you need. So where you can find that hope and that inspiration, I think it's very, very valuable. So I hope this video has been useful, and I would very much urge you to read this book. It could be easy to skip over this book and go straight to the ones that talk about, okay, how do I focus on just removing this? Let's get on with these irrational beliefs. Let me find out about, what do I need to do to sit with my anxiety, etc. But this is also incredibly useful because, as I said, it's about, perspective, changing your perspective, which is important for OCD recovery, and also it's hope and it's inspiration, which I think is really, really important. But thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.